"Get out, Mom. Jason says you're sick. You could kill us if you stay." Those were the words that ended my life as I knew it. My name is Mae Johnson. I am a black woman. I was 79 years old that winter, and the man responsible for tearing my family apart was my son-in-law. I'm telling this story myself because I need you to understand something from the very beginning. What happened to me was not confusion, not age, not fear running wild. It was a lie, a deliberate lie, planned and executed by a man who wanted my house and decided I was an obstacle he could remove. A few hours before my daughter screamed those words at me, I was sitting at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket, sipping ginger tea. I had a cold. That was all. A sore throat, a runny nose, the kind of thing you get every winter after too many drafts and not enough rest. Jason insisted I take a COVID test. "Just to be safe," he said, standing too close, watching me like I was already contaminated. "At your age, we can't take chances." I didn't argue. I had nothing to hide. I took the test right there in the house, my hands steady, my mind clear. When the result came back, it was negative. Clear as day. Negative. I remember feeling relieved. I remember thinking, "Good. This will calm everyone down." I handed the test to Jason so he could show Maya. He nodded, tight-lipped, and disappeared into his office. That was the moment everything changed. When he came back out, Maya was with him. My daughter wouldn't look at me. She stood several feet away, holding my granddaughter Nia so tightly the child squirmed in discomfort. "Maya?" I said gently. "What's wrong?" She recoiled like I had tried to touch her with something dirty. "Don't come near us," she snapped. I froze. "What are you talking about?" I tested negative. Jason stepped forward and flung a piece of paper at my chest. It fluttered to the floor. Positive. Bold letters. Red markings. A result I knew wasn't real. My heart stuttered. I bent down, picked it up, stared at it as if it might rearrange itself into the truth. It didn't. "That's not mine," I said, my voice shaking. "That's not the result I got. Jason, what is this?" He didn't even pretend to be offended. He just sighed, tired, patient, like a man dealing with someone who had lost her grip on reality. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he said to Maya. "She doesn't remember, or she doesn't want to." "I'm not confused," I said. "I have a cold. That's it. A cold." I tested negative. "You watched me." Maya's face twisted in disgust and fear. She tightened her arms around Nia and took a step back. "You're lying," she said, "or you don't know anymore. Jason says this strain doesn't always show up right away. That's what makes it dangerous." Dangerous. I took a step toward her without thinking. "Sweetheart, look at me. I raised you. You know me." Maya screamed. "Don't come closer." She grabbed a pillow from the couch and threw it at me like she was trying to create distance, like I was something feral. A lamp tipped over. Nia started crying. "Get away from my baby!" Maya shouted. "You're sick!" Jason moved fast then, positioning himself between us, his hand firm on Maya's shoulder. "This is what I warned you about," he said softly. "She doesn't understand boundaries anymore." I stared at him, realization crashing over me in slow, sickening waves. He had taken the real test. He had changed it. He had handed my daughter a lie dressed up as science and fear. "Maya," I whispered, "please, I am begging you. I am not sick with COVID. I would never put you or Nia at risk." Her eyes were wild. "Why would you lie about something like that?" "I'm not lying," I said. "He is." Jason's jaw tightened, just enough for me to notice. "That's enough, Mae." That was the first time he said my name like that, flat, final. And then came the words that sealed my fate. "Get out, Mom. Jason says you're sick. You could kill us if you stay." The front door was already open. Snow blew inside, sharp and loud, carried by a wind that howled like a warning no one wanted to hear. The news had been saying all day to stay inside. Blizzard conditions, roads closing, emergency services stretched thin. I looked around the living room, my living room, the walls I painted, the couch I saved up for, the framed photo of my late husband smiling back at me like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "You're asking me to leave?" I said quietly. "Tonight?" Maya didn't answer. She turned her face away. Jason nodded. "You can't stay here, not like this." I reached for my coat. It was the thin one by the door, not my winter coat. My real coat was in the hall closet, but I didn't ask for it. I already understood how this was going to end. Nia peeked out from behind her mother's shoulder, her little face wet with tears. "Grandma?" she whimpered. I smiled through the ache in my chest. "It's okay, baby," I said. "Grandma just needs some fresh air." Jason scooped her up and carried her away. "Go upstairs," he told Maya. "I'll handle this." I stepped onto the porch. The cold hit me like a slap. Snow soaked my shoes instantly. The door slammed behind me, hard enough to rattle the frame. Click. The lock. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting against the door, feeling the finality of it. Then, one by one, the lights inside went out. I turned and walked into the storm. I had $37 in my purse. No phone, no place to go, just a fake test result and the knowledge that the man my daughter married had decided I was better off gone. I didn't know it yet, but before morning, I would collapse in the snow, and nothing about my life would ever be the same again. If you feel for May, hit the like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You might find someone nearby watching with you. I don't remember how long I walked that night. The snow came down in thick, heavy sheets, muffling every sound except the crunch of my own steps and the wind whistling past the empty streets. My fingers had gone numb within minutes, and the cold had settled deep in my bones like it intended to stay. I pulled my coat tighter around me. It barely covered my knees and tried to shield my face with my scarf, but it was no match for that kind of storm. I walked because I had nowhere to stop. Not a single friend to call, not a soul who would expect me at their door after midnight in the middle of a blizzard. Everyone I knew was old, just like me, vulnerable, tucked inside behind locked doors and taped-up windows, and the rest? They were gone, buried, moved away, or lost to time like forgotten names on a church program. I crossed 63rd Street, blinking through the snow, past the church where I used to sing in the choir. A warm memory tried to rise Deacon Thompson, tapping time with his cane during "His Eye is on the Sparrow," but it faded just as quickly when a gust of wind nearly knocked me off my feet. My legs were trembling. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't feel the strap of my purse digging into my shoulder. But the worst part, the part that hurt more than the cold, was the silence inside me. There was no anger yet, no screaming or pleading in my head. Just a hollow, stunned quiet. Like my mind couldn't catch up with what my body already knew. I had been thrown away. The house I had lived in for over 40 years, the house I built with my husband, was no longer mine. My husband, Harold, had poured the foundation himself. Back in the early 70s, before Chicago banks would approve loans to black families in this part of town, we scraped and saved and borrowed from neighbors to build that house brick by brick. I had picked every curtain, planted every rosebush in the yard. Maya had taken her first steps across our living room floor. Now, it was Jason's house. He walked those halls like he owned them, and maybe, legally, he did. That thought hit me harder than the wind. Had he changed the deed? I stopped under the yellow glow of a broken streetlight, panting. My chest ached from the cold, from the betrayal, from the weight of the question that wouldn't leave me alone. Jason had always talked about the house like it was an investment. He'd asked more than once if I'd considered putting Maya on the title. For tax purposes, he'd said. I never agreed. I never signed anything. But I had trusted him. That trust now felt like another layer of cold pressing against my skin. I kept moving, each step slower than the last. Somewhere near the corner of Lafayette and 64th, I spotted the dark outline of a church bus parked on the side of the road. Its windows were frosted over, but it blocked the wind just enough for me to collapse against its side. I slid down, my back pressed to the metal, and pulled my knees into my chest. I didn't cry. I wanted to. Lord knows I did. But the tears wouldn't come. It was like even my grief had been frozen solid. I don't know how long I sat there, but my body was beginning to shut down. I could feel it. My thoughts got slow, distant. I started to think about little things, random things. The lemon pound cake I used to bake for Maya's birthday. The first snowfall the year Harold died. The way the house creaked differently in winter. Then I saw something. A light, dim and flickering, about half a block away. A green neon sign in the shape of a cross, buzzing weakly above a tiny storefront. It looked like a pharmacy or clinic, the kind of place that stayed open late to sell cough syrup and heating pads. I forced myself up. My knees buckled, but I didn't let them give out. "One more block," I told myself. "You just need to get inside. Get warm. Then figure out what comes next." I stumbled toward the door, one hand on the glass. The warmth hit me like a wave when it opened a dry, stale heat from an old radiator humming against the wall. The place was empty except for a young woman behind the counter, maybe 35, tapping on her phone. She looked up, startled. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. My mouth was frozen, lips numb. She rushed over, her eyes wide with alarm. "Jesus," she whispered. "Come sit down." She wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and guided me to a plastic chair near a dusty space heater. My body shook violently, a deep tremor I couldn't control. "Do you have a phone? Someone I can call?" I opened my purse with trembling fingers and realized what I already knew. I had left my phone on the kitchen table, right next to the real COVID test, the one that said negative. "No," I rasped. "No one." The woman hesitated, then pulled out her own phone. "I'm calling someone anyway. You need help." 10 minutes later, paramedics arrived. They put me on a stretcher, checked my pulse, asked questions I could barely understand. I remember one of them saying my temperature was dangerously low. Another asked how long I'd been outside. I couldn't answer. I was slipping. As they wheeled me out into the storm, I caught one last glimpse of the pharmacy window. The reflection staring back at me didn't look like me. It looked like a woman worn thin, used up, discarded. But underneath the cold, underneath the shock, a new feeling was starting to grow. It wasn't forgiveness. It was fire. I woke to the sound of beeping, soft, rhythmic, steady. I was warm, which confused me at first. My last memory had been the bitter sting of snow against my cheeks, the blur of streetlights through falling ice. Now there was a blanket pulled up to my chest. The air smelled faintly of bleach and hand sanitizer, and someone had placed socks on my feet. Hospital. That was my first clear thought. Treated. I turned my head slowly, wincing at the tightness in my neck. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A heart monitor blinked beside me, calm and unhurried. There was a plastic pitcher of water on the table and a laminated sign taped to the wall with a nurse's name, J. Willoughby, RN. My mouth was so dry I could barely speak, but I tried anyway. "Excuse me." The curtain pulled back a moment later, and in walked a nurse in her late 30s. She was black, tall, with tightly braided hair and calm, professional eyes. She looked surprised to see me awake. "Well, hey there, Miss Johnson," she said, adjusting something on the IV bag. "You gave us quite a scare." I blinked. "What happened?" "You had mild hypothermia. You were found unresponsive near a clinic on 64th and Lafayette. A woman there called the ambulance. Do you remember any of that?" I nodded slowly. "The pharmacy. You're lucky. If she hadn't brought you in, you could have gone unconscious in that snow within the hour." I tried to sit up straighter. "How long have I been here?" "Overnight. You were admitted around 2 a.m. It's noon now." I let that sink in. I was alive, but still frozen inside by everything that had happened just before the snow. "Did anyone call my daughter?" I asked quietly. The nurse glanced down at her chart. "There was no emergency contact listed. You didn't have your phone on you." I sank back into the pillow. "Of course I didn't." Jason had seen to that. The phone was probably sitting right where I left it on the kitchen table, next to the real COVID test. The one he switched out. "Is someone looking for me?" I asked. "My family?" She hesitated just a little too long. "We haven't heard from anyone, ma'am." I stared at the ceiling. So it was true. Maya hadn't even called to check if I was alive. Not even a courtesy phone call to the hospital after throwing her 79-year-old mother into a blizzard. The nurse must have seen something shift in my face, because she gave me a gentler look then. "Is there someone else we can contact for you?" she asked. I shook my head. "No one close, everyone's gone." She nodded quietly. "Well, you've got us now. We'll take good care of you." After she left, I lay still, watching the slow blink of the monitor, the rise and fall of my chest under the blanket. My body had survived the cold, but my life, the one I had lived for decades, had cracked in two. I thought back to the paper Jason had thrown at me, the fake test result. I remembered the font was different, just slightly. The header was off-center, and the barcode was blurry. I didn't catch it in the moment, but my mind kept replaying it like a reel of film. the weight of the paper, the red ink, the smug certainty on Jason's face. He knew I'd believe it. Or at least, he knew Maya would. The worst part wasn't the forgery. It was how easily he got her to believe it. Maya had been slipping away for a long time, I realized. It started small missed calls, a little impatience in her tone. Then bigger things. Letting Jason handle the bills, rolling her eyes when I reminded her about church on Sundays, brushing me off when I warned her about controlling behavior. But I never thought she'd throw me out. I never thought she'd look at me like I was dangerous. That look. I reached for the side table and fumbled for the call button. The nurse returned moments later. "I need to talk to someone," I said. "Someone in administration." She raised an eyebrow. "You feeling okay?" "I need a copy of my COVID test," I said. "The one I took before everything happened." She nodded slowly. "All right, we can pull your lab results for you. Do you remember where you got tested?" "Yes," I said. "At home." Jason administered it. "But I want a new test, done here, right now." The nurse didn't argue. She simply said, "I'll get the paperwork started," and left me alone again. As I lay there, a strange thing happened. The fire returned. That spark I'd felt the night before, when I stood on that porch and realized Jason had lied, it was back, and it was growing. Jason had faked a medical result, lied to his wife, thrown an elderly woman out into a blizzard during a pandemic, and what's worse, he thought he'd get away with it. But he didn't know me. I wasn't dead yet. Later that day, a hospital administrator stopped by with a printout of the test they'd run on me. Negative, clear, in bold. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and placed it in my purse. It was my proof. It wasn't enough to repair what was broken, but it was something solid in a world that had gone slippery under my feet. By nightfall, I was released to a temporary care center for the elderly with no home. They called it transitional housing. Clean bed, hot meals, nurses who actually listened. And for the first time in what felt like years, I slept through the night. But when I woke up the next morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to let Jason win. He wanted my house? He'd have to fight me for it. The transitional care center wasn't much, but it was warm. I had a private room with clean sheets and a little window that looked out over a frozen parking lot. Every morning, a nurse named Carla brought me coffee black, no sugar, just how I liked it, and asked how I slept. I answered with a polite smile, but my mind was never really there. I wasn't here to rest. I was here to gather strength. Jason thought he had taken everything from me. He thought tossing me into the cold would be the end of my story. But what he didn't count on was my memory. See, I'm old, yes, but I remember everything, especially paper. Harold and I kept records for everything, receipts, contracts, tax returns dating back to 1984, all filed in neat manila folders, stored in 2 drawers of a steel cabinet in the basement. That house, my house, was built on hard work, discipline, and documentation, and unless Jason had burned it all, those files were still there. And in those files was the original deed, the one with only my name on it. I wasn't sure if I still had legal ownership, but I knew where to start. So, on my 3rd day at the care center, I asked Carla to help me find a lawyer. She gave me a look, one of those tight-lipped smiles people give old women when they think we've confused daytime television with reality. But she didn't argue. She came back an hour later with a printed list. One name jumped out at me, Annalise Carter, Esquire, Elder Law and Family Protection. I liked the sound of that. I asked Carla to call her. Annalise arrived the next day wearing a pea coat and boots still wet with salt from the sidewalk. She was in her early 40s, smart eyes, no nonsense. When she entered my room, she didn't talk down to me, didn't call me sweetie or ma'am. She said, "Mrs. Johnson, I'm here to listen. Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the night Jason threw me out, about the fake COVID test, about Maya's terror, Jason's lies, the slam of the door, the snow swallowing me whole. I showed her the real test result, negative, and the forged one I'd picked up off the floor before stumbling into the storm. She listened the whole time without interrupting. When I was done, she sat forward and asked just one question. "Did you ever sign over the house?" "No," I said. "Never." Jason asked me to once. He said it would simplify inheritance, but I refused. I told him Maya would get it when I passed, not before. Annalise nodded. "Then we need to see the current deed. If your name is still on it, We have options. Even if it's been transferred, how it was transferred will matter. Jason's slick, I said. He could have forged something, or tricked Maya into signing something on my behalf. Annalise opened her laptop. Then let's find out. That afternoon, she filed a request with the Cook County Recorder's Office. While we waited, she also pulled a background report on Jason. What came back chilled me deeper than any winter night. Jason had changed his last name 5 years ago. Before that, he'd been arrested under a different identity for wire fraud. It wasn't a conviction, but it was close. He'd taken money from an elderly woman in Evanston after offering to help manage her estate, promised investments, promised safety. Then he disappeared. Charges were dropped after a settlement, but it was there in black and white. Annalise stared at the screen. "He's done this before," she said. I sat back, breath shallow. My hands trembled not from age, not from fear, but from rage. Jason hadn't just turned Maya against me. He'd practiced this. He found vulnerable women, preyed on family ties, then took everything. I wasn't just a victim. I was part of a pattern. The next day, the county sent over a scanned copy of the deed. When Annalise opened it, we both leaned in. My heart stopped. The name listed on the current deed was Jason Monroe. Date of transfer, 8 months ago. Witness signature, Maya Johnson. But not mine. Not the owner's. And that was the problem. He filed a quitclaim deed, Annalise muttered. Filed it with Maya as witness. Claimed you gifted him the property. I never signed that, I said. I believe you. She zoomed in on the signature. It looked like mine, but something was wrong. Too smooth, too careful, like someone had practiced it. We can request a forensic handwriting analysis, she said. If it's a forgery, we can contest the transfer. And if Maya says I signed it? I asked, voice tight. Annalise looked me straight in the eye. Then it's her word against yours. But with the test forgery and Jason's history, you have more leverage than you think. I took a deep breath. Then we fight. Over the next week, we gathered everything. The original documents, the old tax records, a notarized statement I signed with Annalise, declaring I never transferred the deed. And then we filed an injunction. Jason was served 3 days later. According to the papers, he answered the door with his usual charm, claimed it was all a big misunderstanding. Maya, Annalise said, never appeared. I imagined him standing there, smiling that slimy smile of his, thinking he'd talk his way out of it. But this time, he wasn't facing a woman he could bully with fear. This time, he was facing me and the truth. 2 weeks passed after we filed the injunction. 2 weeks of waiting, watching the calendar, and preparing myself for the storm that would follow. But this time, it wasn't snow I feared. It was the reckoning. I had never filed a lawsuit in my life. I wasn't the type to stir trouble. I was raised to keep my head down, do the right thing, pray on it, and let the Lord handle the rest. But even the Lord gives you feet to walk away and a voice to call out injustice when you see it. Jason didn't know that version of me. He only saw the quiet, aging widow who knit scarves and minded her grandbaby. He didn't see the woman who once marched in the streets of Chicago in the 60s for voting rights, or the woman who built a life from nothing but grit and faith after losing her husband too soon, or the mother who knew how to protect a child, even when that child didn't know she needed saving. Now he would. Annalise called me one morning at the care center, her voice crisp. He's responded through his attorney, she said. He's denying everything. Claims you gifted him the house, willingly said you were grateful for his help managing the family. I nearly dropped the phone. Grateful? He forged a test and threw me into a blizzard. He's banking on your silence, Mrs. Johnson, but we've got more than he does. We filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent any sale or transfer of the house until the forgery claim could be heard. The judge granted it immediately. That alone must have rattled him, because a day later, Maya showed up. I was sitting in the courtyard of the care center, wrapped in a shawl, watching birds pick at crumbs near the benches. The wind had softened. It was one of those rare February mornings where you could almost pretend spring was coming. Mom? I turned. Maya stood on the walkway holding Naya's hand. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red. She looked thinner, like guilt had been chewing on her from the inside out. Nia let go of her hand and ran toward me. Grandma! I opened my arms and caught her, inhaling the scent of cocoa butter and the faint sweetness of her shampoo. I hadn't held her in weeks. Just feeling her heartbeat against mine made my chest tremble. Maya approached slowly. I shouldn't have believed him, she said, voice cracking. He showed me the test. He said you were confused. He said you hated him, that you were trying to turn me against him. And you listened, I said softly but firmly. She looked down. I don't know when I stopped thinking for myself, she whispered. I thought I was protecting my daughter. I nodded, the cold not from the wind but from something deeper. You were, but not from me. I'm sorry, she said. I've never been more sorry for anything in my life. I studied her face. I wanted to believe her. Lord knows I did. But pain carves deep, especially when it comes from your own blood. Do you know what he's done? I asked. She hesitated. I know he forged the deed. I found the real documents in a drawer in the garage tucked under some tools. The signature doesn't match yours. I knew it the moment I saw it. I took a deep breath. And you stayed? She wiped her eyes. Not anymore. I left this morning, took Nia. I'm staying at a friend's. That hit me hard because I knew how hard it is to leave, even when the truth is unbearable. Did he threaten you? I asked. She shook her head. No, he just manipulates, twists things, makes you feel like you owe him, like without him you'd fall apart. I reached out and took her hand, not in forgiveness but in acknowledgement. You don't owe him anything, I said, and neither do I. We sat together in silence for a long moment. Then Maya reached into her coat pocket and handed me something folded. It was the fake test, the one Jason had printed. I found this too, she said. He left it in the printer tray. I should have known. I'm so sorry, Mom. I stared at it. I didn't need to read it again. I had every word burned into my mind. Keep it, I said. It's evidence now. Later that afternoon, Annalise added it to our file. A forged medical document, a falsified deed, a history of fraud. We had more than a case now. We had a pattern. The next week, we had our first hearing. Jason arrived in a tailored suit, polished shoes, and that same smile he wore the first time I met him. He sat beside his attorney like he hadn't just tried to erase an old woman from her own life. But when the judge asked if the signature on the deed was mine, and I said loud and clear, "No, Your Honor, I never signed that paper," he blinked. Just once. The crack in the mask. Maya sat in the gallery behind me. Nia played quietly on her lap. We weren't whole, not yet, but we were there, together. And that was a start. The day after the hearing, I found myself staring at a letter from the court, hands trembling just a little as I read the printed words. Discovery phase initiated. Parties may begin submitting requested documents. This was real. This was happening. No longer whispers in the kitchen or silent grief beneath a pile of blankets. This was a courtroom, a judge, and the truth on trial. Annalise called me within the hour. This is our moment, May. We ask for everything. Emails, texts, bank transfers, anything Jason has touched in the last 2 years. He won't be ready for this. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. Make it count, I said. Maya agreed to submit her own evidence. She turned over an old iPad that Jason used to manage their bills, and it turned out to be a gold mine. Buried among school newsletters and grocery lists were emails Jason had sent to an online real estate consultant dated 3 weeks before the supposed deed transfer. He'd been shopping my house around, listing values, remodeling estimates, even a draft email asking how to remove a legacy occupant with minimal legal interference. I sat in the corner of the care center lounge, that iPad on my lap, rereading those words until they blurred. Legacy occupant. That's what I was to him. Not a woman, not a mother, not a grandmother. A problem. But it wasn't just about me anymore. The more we dug, the more rot we uncovered. Jason had 2 savings accounts Maya didn't know about. One held over $38,000. The other, just under $60,000, had regular deposits from a company called Right Future Holdings, LLC. Annalise traced that company back to a shell firm registered in Florida. Its business? Purchasing distressed properties from elderly homeowners. The pieces clicked into place with such sickening clarity, I nearly dropped the tablet. Jason wasn't just after my house. He was in business. This is predatory elder abuse, Annalise said, voice hard as steel. And once we prove it, this doesn't stop at civil court. We filed a motion to freeze his assets. It was risky. We didn't know how much the judge would allow, but it was worth trying. At the very least, it would rattle him. And it did. Because 3 days later, Jason showed up at the care center. No appointment. No warning. I was sitting on the bench outside the front lobby, wrapped in a heavier coat Maya had brought me, watching cardinals flit between tree branches. I heard his voice before I saw him. "May, we need to talk." I turned slowly. He looked just like he always did, pressed shirt, perfect hair, polite expression. But now, I saw it clearly. A man losing control. "You're not supposed to be here," I said. "This is private property." "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "Just to clear the air." "Funny," I said. "You seemed pretty committed to muddying it before." He winced, but quickly recovered. "Maya's emotional. She's confused. I'm trying to hold things together." I stood. "You threw me into a snowstorm, Jason. Lied to your wife. Falsified legal documents. And now you're here to smooth it over with charm and clean shoes?" He took a step closer. "Listen to me. We don't have to let this get ugly. These things can be handled quietly. Off the record. I can even offer you a settlement." I laughed, loud and sharp. "A settlement? For my life?" His smile faltered. I stared him down, decades of dignity rising in my chest. "You've underestimated me every step of the way, because I'm old, because I'm quiet, because you thought kindness was weakness. But let me tell you something. Jason Monroe, my name may be on Social Security checks, but that doesn't mean I'm finished." He tried again, softer. "May, come on, think of Maya, of Nia." "I am," I said. "That's exactly who I'm thinking of, and that's why I'm going to stop you." Security came out the doors then, prompted by the receptionist who'd seen Jason walk in. One guard placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, you'll need to leave." Jason stared at me one last time, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw something behind his eyes. Fear. Not of the law, not of the guards, but of me. He turned and walked away without another word. Annalise filed a restraining order that afternoon. Later that night, I lay in my bed at the care center, staring at the ceiling. The adrenaline had worn off. What was left was a deep, familiar ache, the ache of betrayal, of being used, discarded, underestimated. But beneath it, a steel wire of purpose had settled. This wasn't just about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming myself. Jason thought he was clever, a man with a plan, but he didn't know what happens when a woman's back is against the wall, especially a woman who'd already survived worse storms than him. The hearing was set for March 12th, and I was ready. The morning of the hearing, I sat at the edge of my bed, lacing up the shoes Maya had brought me. They were plain black loafers, nothing fancy, but polished just enough to remind me who I was. "Do you want me to drive you, Mom?" she asked from the doorway. I looked up at her. My daughter, older now, wearier, but present. There was no trace of the woman who had screamed at me weeks ago, just someone trying to find her way back. "No," I said gently. "Annalise is sending a car, but thank you." She nodded. "We'll meet you there." I didn't need to ask who she meant. Nia had packed a picture she'd drawn of me, Grandma's house, it said in shaky crayon letters, and insisted on bringing it, for luck. I wore my church coat that morning, the one I used to wear when Harold and I would go out to vote, or when we attended baptisms and homegoings. It still fit. Still carried the faint scent of lavender and dignity. The ride downtown was quiet. Annalise met me at the courthouse steps, her hair pulled back, a steel briefcase in her hand. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Born ready." We passed through security, then walked the long hallway to courtroom 6B. The walls were lined with photos of old judges, men in robes frozen in black and white. One of them looked just like my father's pastor. Inside, the room was colder than I expected. Polished wood, stiff benches, a high bench where the judge sat like a watchful hawk. Jason was already there, flanked by his attorney. His eyes met mine just once, then quickly darted away. He didn't smile. That alone was a victory. The judge was a woman, mid-60s, her hair silver, her tone sharp. Judge Elaine Marbury. "Let's proceed," she said without ceremony. Petitioner Mrs. May Johnson seeks reversal of a property transfer on grounds of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Defense contests on the basis of valid quitclaim deed and alleged verbal consent. Is that correct? Both attorneys confirmed. And then it began. Annalise opened with a calm, measured voice. Your Honor, this is not merely a civil matter about property. This is a case about deception, about a vulnerable woman targeted by someone she trusted. She laid out the timeline: the forged COVID test, the forced eviction during a blizzard, the suspicious deed transfer, and Jason's financial dealings. She didn't raise her voice once, but with every sentence, the weight of the truth filled the room like rising water. Then came the exhibits. The forged test, the handwriting analysis showing my signature had been copied. Maya's sworn affidavit stating she never saw me sign anything. Screenshots of Jason's emails about flipping the house, the iPad logs, the financial transactions. Jason's lawyer tried to object, claimed the evidence was circumstantial. Misinterpreted. Claimed Jason had stepped in as caretaker and was managing family assets in good faith. Judge Marbury stared over her glasses. He managed her out the front door in sub-zero temperatures. Spare me the euphemisms. I had to bite my lip to keep from smiling. When it was my turn to testify, I walked slowly to the stand. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted every eye in that room to understand that I still had strength in these bones. Mrs. Johnson, Annalise began, did you ever sign a deed transferring your house to Jason Monroe? No, I did not. Did you ever intend to? No. Did Jason ever discuss such a transfer with you? Yes, once. He said it would help Maya. I said no. She nodded. And what happened the night you were evicted? I told them everything. From the moment Jason insisted I take the test, to the cold night on the porch, to waking up in a hospital wondering if anyone even cared whether I lived or died. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The silence in the courtroom spoke louder than tears. When I stepped down, I passed Jason on my way back to the bench. His eyes met mine again, but this time, they didn't flinch. They burned. He was losing control. The final blow came when the court-appointed forensic analyst testified. The signature on the quitclaim deed had been traced, literally. Jason had printed a scan of my old driver's license, traced the signature, and forged it onto the deed. The pressure patterns didn't match. The ink distribution was uneven. It was fraud, plain and simple. Judge Marbury sat back in her chair, her fingers steepled. This court finds substantial evidence of fraudulent intent, including financial deception, forgery, and manipulation of a vulnerable adult. The property transfer is hereby voided. Full title is returned to May Johnson, effective immediately. Gasps echoed. I closed my eyes, just for a moment, and let it sink in. Then the judge added, almost as an afterthought, this case will be referred to the state attorney for potential criminal prosecution. Jason's face cracked open in that moment. The mask shattered. He stood, mouth opening to protest, but his lawyer tugged his sleeve and whispered sharply. It was over. Maya and Nia were waiting for me outside the courtroom. Maya's face was streaked with tears. Nia handed me her drawing, now slightly crumpled. I told you we'd win, she said proudly. I knelt down and hugged her tight. Yes, baby, I whispered. We did. Winning in court doesn't feel like winning right away. Not when the damage is still fresh, and the echoes of betrayal still ring louder than the gavel. I spent the next few days back at the Transitional Care Center, even though legally, the house was mine again. It wasn't a matter of logistics, it was emotional. I wasn't ready to walk through that front door, not yet. The memory of standing on that porch in the freezing dark was still too vivid. My mind still saw Jason's smug face, still heard Maya's trembling voice, fueled by fear and lies. That house wasn't home, not until I reclaimed it in spirit, not just on paper. Annalise understood. Healing isn't just about justice, she said. It's about peace. Take your time. So I did. But outside my quiet window, the world spun quickly. The media caught wind of the court's ruling. A local news station did a brief segment, Elderly Woman Wins Back Home After Fraud Case Exposes Deception. They wanted an interview. I declined. This wasn't a story to me. It was my life. What interested me more was what followed. 2 more women contacted Annalise. Both had dated Jason years ago. Both said they had lost property, money, or family under mysterious circumstances. Neither had pursued legal action at the time. One said through tears, "He made me feel like I owed him everything. And then he took everything." Jason was being investigated, not just by civil court now, but by the state. He hadn't just hurt me. He had a pattern, and for once, it looked like justice might chase him all the way to prison. But that didn't fix my life. It was Maya who helped me begin that work. She came by every evening after picking Nia up from daycare. She brought meals, real ones, fried catfish with hot sauce, macaroni with too much cheese, the kinds of food that said, "I'm sorry," without saying it. We'd sit at the small table in the care center's common room, eating and watching Nia draw stick figures or pretend to teach her dolls algebra. There was a peace to those nights, soft and slow like healing rain. But forgiveness wasn't instant. One night, after dinner, Maya stayed behind. Nia was asleep in her arms. "I've been looking for a therapist," she said quietly, "someone who specializes in trauma and manipulation." I raised my eyebrows. "For me," she added, "not just Nia." I nodded. "That's good, baby." She hesitated. Do you believe me now, that I'm trying?" I didn't answer right away. My hands were folded in my lap, eyes on the sleeping child nestled into her shoulder. "I believe you want to," I said. "That's a start." She nodded slowly. "I'll take it." The next morning, I went to the house. Annalise drove me. We didn't speak much during the ride. There was nothing left to say. When we pulled up to the curb, I saw it as if for the first time. The shutters needed painting. The grass was yellowed with winter, the rose bushes bare, but it was still standing. My house, my name, my history. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. My legs were steady. The porch was empty. No Jason, no threats, just the wind rustling through brittle leaves. I walked up the steps. Annalise handed me the keys, and I unlocked the door. Inside, everything smelled stale, the kind of closed-up scent that builds when love has been replaced with tension and secrets. I walked slowly through the rooms, the living room, the kitchen, the small hallway with the dent in the wall from when Harold carried in Nia's playhouse and misjudged the corner. The basement still had the metal filing cabinet. I knelt before it, opened the top drawer, and there it was. The original deed, signed by me, dated, notarized. A piece of paper, but also a piece of my life. I exhaled slowly and let the silence hold me. Later that day, I opened every window in the house, let the wind carry out what didn't belong. I cleaned, I scrubbed, I poured out every bottle Jason had left behind, every wine glass, every cologne. I boxed it all, tossed it on the curb. When Maya arrived that evening with Nia, she paused at the doorway. "You're back," she said softly. "No," I replied. "I never left. They just tried to erase me." She stepped inside. Her eyes widened at the fresh air, the open blinds. "It feels lighter," she whispered. I smiled. That night, I let Nia pick the first movie we'd watch in the house again. She chose The Princess and the Frog. As she curled up beside me on the couch, I ran my fingers through her hair. Maya brought popcorn and sat at my other side. We watched the screen, but I watched them. And somewhere deep inside, something settled. The house was mine again. But more than that, I was myself again. And I wasn't going anywhere. The days that followed were quiet, almost deceptively so. The kind of quiet that makes you second-guess whether the storm is truly over or just hiding behind the next bend. But one thing was certain. The house was mine again, not just legally, but spiritually. I could breathe in it, sleep in it, cook in it, pray in it, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. Still, shadows don't vanish just because the light returns. One afternoon, I was in the backyard raking up dead leaves, humming to myself, when Maya pulled up unexpectedly. She got out of the car slowly, her shoulders tense. She was holding an envelope. "I got a letter," she said without greeting. She handed it to me. The return address made my stomach flip. Cook County Jail. Jason. I opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter on lined paper. Neat. Too neat. "May, I'm not writing to make excuses. I know you'll never forgive me. I just want you to know, it wasn't always fake. I loved Maya. I loved Nia. I just didn't know how to live without control. It made me feel safe, strong, but it consumed me. You beat me, fair and square. I won't fight the charges. I'll serve my time. Tell Nia I'm sorry I scared her. Jason, I read it twice, then again. It wasn't apology. It wasn't remorse. It was an attempt to rewrite the narrative, to frame himself as a man who lost control, not a man who planned to steal, lie, and destroy. Maya stood beside me, eyes scanning my face. What does it say? He wants forgiveness without truth, I said, folding the letter. That's not how it works. She nodded. Do you want to respond? No, I said firmly. Some people only hear themselves, and I'm done listening. She let out a breath. Good. But the letter stirred something in me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. My mind wandered not to Jason, but to Harold, to the kind of man he had been. Solid, gentle, the kind of man who picked roses on Sundays just because he knew I liked them on the kitchen table. He'd built this house with me, room by room, paycheck by paycheck. Jason tried to steal it in a signature. The audacity still burned. But what stayed with me more was the silence from others. Church friends who never called, neighbors who watched but said nothing, even distant cousins who'd only reached out after the news coverage aired. Where were they when I was in the snow? That question lingered. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. The following week, I went to a local community center. They had a program called Voices of the Forgotten, a circle of seniors who had experienced abuse, eviction, or neglect, mostly women, mostly invisible. I stood at the front of the group, cleared my throat, and told them my story, from beginning to end. The forged test, the slammed door, the blizzard, the court, the victory. By the time I finished, a few women were crying. One stood up and said, "That happened to me too. My son took my bank card and said it was for groceries. I believed him until the mortgage went unpaid for 5 months. Another whispered, "My niece forged my name on a nursing home release form, had me committed." The stories poured out like a broken dam, and in that room I realized this wasn't just my story, it was ours. After that, I began volunteering at the center, just a few hours a week helping people gather documents, connect with legal aid, know their rights. I didn't have a law degree, but I had something better, proof that the fight could be won. One afternoon, Annalise dropped by the center with a folder in hand. "I thought you'd want to see this," she said, placing it on the table. I opened it. Inside were court documents. Jason had accepted a plea deal, 5 years in prison, with mandatory restitution and psychological evaluation. I nodded, but I didn't smile. "Still seems light," I said. "Maybe," Annalise replied, "but your testimony, your case, it's already changing the system. The judge used your trial to push new policy reviews on elder deed transfers." I blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "You didn't just take back your home, you're protecting hundreds more." I exhaled deeply, and for the first time since the snowstorm, I felt the cold finally leave my chest. When I returned home that evening, Nia was waiting on the porch with a picture she'd drawn. It showed 3 people holding hands: Grandma, Mommy, me. Underneath it, she'd written, "Home is when you don't feel scared anymore." I knelt down, hugged her tight, and whispered, "That's right, baby. And we're never letting fear take this place again." Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it came loud, bursting through every window like it had something to prove. Tulips bloomed where snowdrifts had buried my flower beds. The wind smelled like rain and clean laundry. And the house, it breathed again. For the first time in months, I opened every curtain, polished every window, and turned up the music, Aretha Franklin on vinyl. I let her voice fill every corner of the home Jason had tried to steal. Louder than his lies, richer than his empty promises. Maya and I planned a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just friends, neighbors, and folks from the community center. A homecoming, we called it. Not just a celebration of winning back the house, but a chance to reclaim it with laughter, voices, and plates of good food. "I'll cook," Maya said, "and no arguments, Mom." I held up my hands in surrender. "You're the one with the fancy air fryer." She smirked. "Fried chicken, baked macaroni, and I'm calling Miss Henrietta for her peach cobbler." That got my attention. You better tell her not to hold back on the cinnamon this time. Word spread faster than we expected. By the afternoon of the party, folks I hadn't seen in years were pulling up out front, hugging me like time hadn't passed. Old choir members, one of Harold's old poker buddies, even Miss Evelyn from the corner store, 92 years old and still dressed like she ran a fashion house in Paris. "You still remember how to throw a gathering," she said, eyeing the collard greens on the table. "Some things never leave your bones," I said with a wink. The house was full of voices, again real ones, kind ones. The walls, once heavy with secrets and cold silences, now echoed with laughter and gospel. At one point, Nia ran up to me holding a paper crown made of construction paper and glitter glue. "You're the queen of the house, Grandma." I bent down, let her place it on my head. "That's right, baby. Long may I reign." People clapped and hollered. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Later in the evening, as the crowd thinned and plates emptied, I stood at the edge of the living room and looked around. The fireplace Harold built with his own hands. The photo wall Maya helped me repaint when she was 12. The braided rug I had brought back from a little shop in New Orleans. These things weren't just furniture or decorations. They were proof. Proof that roots go deeper than signatures, that a house becomes a home not because of ownership, but because of memory, love, and resilience. Annalise arrived just before sunset, still in heels from court. "You clean up well," she said, handing me a bottle of sparkling cider. "I clean up damn strong," I replied, and we clinked glasses. She nodded toward the crowd. "You know, most of my cases end in a handshake and a check. This..." She paused. "This is something else. You helped give it back to me. You took it back yourself, May. I just cleared the path." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Nia dance barefoot on the hardwood, spinning in dizzy little circles, cheeks glowing. "You ever think about telling your story publicly?" Annalise asked. I turned to her. "What do you mean?" "A speaking tour. Interviews. Teaching people how to recognize fraud, protect their assets. You've already started at the community center. Why not go bigger?" I thought about it. Not because I needed attention, not for a second, but because the room was full of people who had come close to losing something precious. Some had already lost. Some still lived quiet lives full of bruises nobody saw. "I'll think about it," I said softly. "But for now, I just want one night to remember what safe feels like." She smiled. "You earned that." As the sun dipped below the rooftops, Maya lit candles on the front porch. Nia curled up in my lap, eyelids heavy, crown slipping sideways. I held her close and hummed a hymn my mother used to sing. It was strange, really, how something as cruel as betrayal could bloom into something this full of grace. But maybe that's the real miracle. Not that justice was served, but that love found its way back through all that ruin and stayed. A week after the homecoming, I found myself climbing the attic steps for the first time in years. Not because I needed anything up there, but because healing has a rhythm, and mine whispered it was time. The attic door creaked open like it always had, a slow groan of wood against age. Dust swirled in the single beam of sunlight cutting through the round window. It smelled like old paper, cedar, and time, a smell I knew deep in my bones. I'd stored everything up there: photo albums, Harold's war medals, boxes of Naya's old baby clothes, letters, receipts, newspaper clippings. The attic had always been my time capsule, forgotten, untouched, safe. Until Jason. He'd been up there, I knew it. Not just because things were shifted or rearranged, but because the air felt wrong. Like something had been disturbed that shouldn't have. I knelt beside an old cedar chest, its hinges rusted and ribbon-tied with a memory. Inside were the deeds to the house, every one since 1971. Paper trails of every upgrade, tax payment, and renovation. Handwritten notes from Harold, reminding me to check the boiler before winter, or plant tomatoes before May. All of it still here, untouched. But tucked behind those papers, in a slim envelope sealed with old tape, I found something I hadn't remembered packing: a letter from Harold. Written on yellow legal paper, addressed to May, just in case. I sat back on my heels, heart pounding as I unfolded it. "May, if you're reading this, something's gone sideways. I probably forgot to lock the attic again, or you're doing one of your spring cleaning marathons. Either way, if this letter finds you after I'm gone, there's something you should know. I never wanted you to carry everything alone. You were always the strong one, the builder, the backbone. But even the strongest tree needs rest sometimes. If anything ever threatens the house, our home, I want you to know, without a doubt, that it was built with you in mind. Not for legacy, not for the kids, for you. You made it sacred. You filled it with warmth. It lives because you lived inside it. Don't let anyone take that from you. Love, always, Harold. The tears came slow, not dramatic, just steady, the kind that falls when truth hits somewhere deeper than memory. He knew, all those years ago, he knew the world might someday try to erase me. He believed I'd stand anyway. I sat there for a long time, holding that letter to my chest, rocking gently like I used to with Maya when she was a baby. That afternoon, I copied Harold's letter and placed the original in a new frame. I set it on the mantel in the living room right above where I planned to hang a small brass plaque. This home belongs to May Johnson. Mother, fighter, survivor. Not because I needed validation, but because every woman who's ever been silenced needs to know that reclaiming space is sacred work. Later that evening, I got a call from the community center. One of the women from the group, Mrs. Landry, had just lost her case against her son. He'd transferred her name off a joint bank account while she was in the hospital and emptied it within days. She was too humiliated to speak during her hearing, froze on the stand. The court ruled in his favor. She said she's too old to fight anymore, the center director told me. She doesn't think it's worth it. I gripped the phone tighter. Can I visit her? They gave me the address. I went the next morning. Mrs. Landry lived in a small rental, no bigger than my pantry. No photos on the walls, no warmth, just silence and shame. She didn't speak much at first, just stared at her tea. I know what it feels like, I said quietly, to be tricked by someone you loved. She looked up, slowly. Her eyes were clouded, not just by age, but by hurt. I trusted him, she whispered. He used to braid my hair when he was little, said he'd always take care of me. I took her hand. He still has to live with what he did, I said, but you don't have to let it define you. You're not done yet, Mrs. Landry. Don't let him finish the story. Her lip trembled. I'm just tired. I know, I whispered, but if you've got breath, you've got power. Let us help. She nodded slowly. When I left her that day, I knew I'd found my new fight. Not just my own, but theirs. These women forgotten, dismissed, shamed into silence, they deserved more. They deserved a voice, a platform, a place. The attic had reminded me. History isn't just what we carry. It's what we choose to pass on. A few weeks after visiting Mrs. Landry, I found myself sitting in the kitchen with Maya, a legal pad in front of me, pen in hand. We need a name, I said. Maya blinked. A name for what? For the group, I replied. The one we're building. For women like Mrs. Landry. For all of us who've been stepped over, silenced, or stolen from. She leaned back, thinking, something strong. Something we can say without whispering, I added. We tossed around a dozen names. Second Bloom, The Quiet Reclaim, The Hearth Project. All good, none right. Then Nia wandered in from the living room with one of her drawings, grinning. Look, Grandma, it's our family, but the table's longer now. I made more chairs for all the people who come to dinner. Maya and I stared at the picture. A long, stretched-out table. Little stick figures seated all around, labeled Mom, Grandma, me, Miss Evelyn, Miss Landry, Auntie Rita, Pastor Deb. I smiled, heart full. That's it, I said, the longer table. And just like that, the name stuck. We filed for nonprofit status 2 weeks later. It started simple flyers at churches, messages on Facebook, announcements in hair salons and bingo halls. Maya set up a website. Annalise agreed to volunteer legal guidance once a week. And every Thursday afternoon, the living room in my home turned into a sanctuary. We didn't call it group therapy. We called it returning home. At first it was just 5 women, then 10, then 20. Stories came like floodwater. One woman whose grandson sold her car without asking. Another whose niece took out a credit card in her name. One whose own daughter slowly drained her savings account while claiming to help. Each story different. Each wound familiar. We didn't fix everything overnight. That wasn't the point. We listened. We hugged. We cried. We reminded each other, You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not alone. One Thursday, a woman named Charlene stood up and said, "They tell us to be grateful. You've had a long life, they say. But that don't mean we're done living. We still matter. We still have rights." Applause broke out. I looked around that circle and realized this wasn't just recovery. It was revival. Meanwhile, Jason's sentencing date approached. The state had concluded its investigation. In addition to what he did to me, they found evidence of 2 other fraudulent property transfers, both involving elderly women in surrounding counties. His pattern had become a path straight to prison. Annalise prepared me for the hearing. "You can give a victim statement," she said, "if you want." I nodded. "Oh, I do." Maya offered to come with me, but I said no. "I need to do this one alone," I told her. "But save me a seat at the table when I get home." The courthouse felt different this time. Not like a battleground, more like a place where echoes settled into justice. Jason entered in an orange jumpsuit. His face had changed, less polished, more sunken. He didn't look at me as I stood and approached the podium. But I looked right at him. "My name is May Johnson," I began. "Mother, grandmother, homeowner, and survivor. I trusted you. I opened my home, my heart, and my family to you, and you used that trust like a crowbar to pry your way into the one thing I had left after my husband died, my dignity. You lied, you forged, you manipulated my daughter and put my life in danger, but you didn't win." I took a deep breath. "Because you forgot one thing. I am not invisible. I am not a legacy to be liquidated. I am a woman with a voice. And today, I use it to say, I forgive you." That last part surprised even me, but I meant it. Not for him. For me. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison, with mandatory restitution and a lifetime ban from serving as power of attorney for any elder. As I walked out of that courtroom, I felt taller than I had in months. Not because the system had worked, but because I had. That night, I returned to the longer table, still dressed in my Sunday suit. The room erupted in applause. Maya handed me a plate of cornbread and collard greens. "You did it," she said. "We all did," I replied. Nia tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, tell us a story." I sat down at the head of the table. "All right," I said. "This is a story about a house, not just any house, a house that refused to forget the woman who made it a home." They leaned in close, and I began. The rhythm of life began to settle, slow and sweet like molasses poured on a warm biscuit. The house was no longer a battlefield. It breathed now, floors creaked with memory, not tension. Curtains swayed to the beat of late afternoon breezes. Nia's laughter filled the hallway like wind chimes after a storm. I found myself humming again as I cooked. I even started planting flowers in the front yard, just like Harold used to do zinnias, marigolds, and one stubborn peony that bloomed late but bold. One morning, as I watered the new bed of irises beneath the kitchen window, Maya joined me with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me and leaned against the porch railing. "Looks like spring finally stuck around," she said. I smiled. "Some things just take their time." She nodded. Then, more carefully, I got a job offer. That caught me off guard. "Yeah?" "It's with a nonprofit in D.C. Elder Protection Initiative. They're building a national network of legal resources for seniors." I raised my eyebrows. "Sounds like a calling." "It is," she said. "They found me through the story, the trial. Someone passed along the article about the longer table." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the warmth settle between my hands. "You thinking about going?" "I am," she admitted, "but only if you're okay." I looked at her, my daughter, older now in every way, but still carrying the weight of that cold night, still healing. "You don't owe me your wings, Maya," I said. "You go where the good work calls you." Her eyes misted. "Would you come with us? Just for a while? Until we settle in?" I looked out across the yard. The mailbox Harold nailed into the ground. The swing set Nia still used. The kitchen window that once framed Jason's lies, now open and clean. "I can't leave this house, baby," I said gently, "but I'll help you pack." She nodded, understanding blooming between us like the flowers at our feet. 2 weeks later, I watched from the porch as they loaded boxes into a moving van. Nia waved from the back seat of Maya's car, her stuffed animals lined up like passengers on a cross-country trip. "Call me every Sunday," I told Maya, kissing her forehead. Every Sunday, she promised. As their car pulled away, I stood alone in the driveway and felt the strange tug of goodbye and peace holding hands. But it wasn't loss. It was evolution. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh notebook, brainstorming new ways to grow the longer table. We'd outgrown my living room. We needed space, chairs, resources, grants. And we needed stories. Not just mine. So I wrote letters inviting women from all over the city to come, to speak, to lead. I reached out to retired lawyers, social workers, church organizers. I asked them to bring their experience and sit at the table with us. One reply came from Pastor Deborah, a firecracker of a woman in her 70s who ran a food bank out of her church basement. She wrote, "May, you are building something holy. Let me bring the coffee and the folding chairs." And just like that, the table grew longer again. Weeks passed. Then one morning, a letter arrived. From Jason. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened it. May, I don't expect a reply. I don't deserve one. But I saw the news segment on the longer table, and for the first time, I understood. I didn't just try to steal your house. I tried to erase your voice. I see now how deeply I failed not just you, but Maya and Nia too. I've started attending a class in here about restorative justice. It's hard. It hurts. But I'm learning that pain isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's growth. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just want to say thank you for surviving me. Jason. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. Some battles don't end with a win or a loss. They end with growth. One Sunday afternoon, I stood at the podium of a small town hall, looking out at an audience of 20 or so women. Some had walkers, some had canes, some had scars you couldn't see. Behind me, a banner read, "The longer table, where no voice is forgotten." Home, I told them, is not just a place, it's a verb. It's something we do. It's what we build when we tell the truth, stand our ground, and make space for others at the table. They clapped. And I smiled. Because this was what Harold meant in his letter. The house was never just wood and brick. It was me. And I had come home. It was a Tuesday morning when I got the call. The prison chaplain. I'd been expecting it, in some distant way, like thunder rolling on a dry horizon. Still, my fingers clenched around the phone when I heard his name. "Jason Monroe has requested a visit," the chaplain said. "He's eligible for restorative contact. Non-confrontational, supervised. You're not required to come, but he specifically asked for you." I didn't answer right away. It had been 6 months since his sentencing, 6 months of quiet growth, of the longer table flourishing, of Maya building a new life in D.C., of Nia sending me video messages every weekend showing off missing teeth and new ballet moves. I had forgiven Jason in court, but forgiveness is not the same as closure. So I said yes. Not for him. For me. 2 days later, I sat in a sterile room painted beige, walls lined with inspirational posters that couldn't quite cover the chill. Across from me was an empty plastic chair. I could hear my own breath. When Jason entered, I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was grayer, his posture smaller. The arrogance, the lean-forward smirk he used to carry like armor was gone. He sat down slowly, folding his hands on the table. "Thank you for coming," he said. I said nothing. "I've spent a lot of time thinking," he began. "In here there's nothing but time." I nodded, still silent. "I wanted control," he continued. "Over money, over Maya, over you. Because control made me feel worthy, safe." He paused. "But it came from fear. I never had family like yours. I didn't know how to live inside love that didn't demand something in return." "Then you shouldn't have faked it," I said, voice low and steady. "You don't get to destroy people while you figure out how to be one." Jason lowered his head. "I know. I studied him. This was the man who left me to die in the snow. And yet here he was, broken not by the system, but by the truth of his own reflection. I'm not here for your confession," I said. "I'm here because you asked to see me. So speak what you came to say." He swallowed hard. "I've been working in the prison's outreach program, writing letters to young men about elder abuse, telling them what I did, what it cost." I raised an eyebrow. "You're the cautionary tale now?" "I'm trying," he said quietly. I know I can't fix what I broke, but if I can stop one other man from thinking like I did." He trailed off. The silence hung between us. Then I said the thing I didn't plan to say. "Maya still struggles. She blames herself. You broke something in her too, not just in me." Jason closed his eyes. "I know. You should write her a letter," I said. "Not me." He looked up. "Do you think she'd read it?" I leaned in just slightly. "That's not for you to worry about anymore. You don't get to hope for healing. You just do the work." He nodded. Slowly, gratefully. I stood. "Goodbye, Jason." He didn't ask me to stay, and I didn't look back. Outside, the air was sharp but clean. I walked to the car where Annalise was waiting, flipping through notes for a speech we'd be giving at the State Elder Advocacy Conference in 2 weeks. "How'd it go?" she asked. "I got what I needed," I replied. No fire, no vengeance, just air. That night, I sat in my chair by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. A letter from Naya arrived, drawings, stick figures, and a note written in shaky print. "Grandma, I told my class about how you're a hero." I smiled, a real, full smile. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear orthopedic shoes, carry hard truths in their purses, and sit at longer tables where no one eats alone. I never saw myself as the type to stand behind a podium. I always figured my place was in kitchens, rocking chairs, and Sunday school circles, not in hotel ballrooms filled with lawyers, activists, and state officials. But life has a way of expanding you, if you let it. The Elder Advocacy Conference was held in Chicago, in one of those massive glass buildings where the doors open on their own and the coffee costs $5 more than it should. Annalise and I were invited to speak on the closing panel, Voices of Survival, Transforming Personal Pain into Policy Change. The room was packed. Rows of chairs, cameras in the back, people scribbling in notebooks, some in suits, some in scrubs, some with lines on their faces like mine. I stood behind the curtain, heart hammering against my ribs like an old gospel beat. "I can back out," I whispered to Annalise. "You've got enough to say for both of us." She smiled gently. "They didn't come for me. They came for you." So I walked out, one step at a time, spine straight, blouse ironed, Harold's old church pin fastened to my collar. When they introduced me, May Johnson, founder of the Longer Table, survivor of elder fraud and eviction, the room stood. All of them. I wasn't prepared for that. I adjusted the mic and cleared my throat. "Good afternoon," I began. "My name is May Johnson. I'm 79 years old, and 6 months ago my own daughter kicked me out of my home." A murmur rippled across the room. She didn't do it out of malice. She did it because the man she married convinced her I was dangerous, contagious, and in the way. And she believed him because sometimes fear wears a familiar face. I paused, let the words settle. I was left out in a blizzard with nothing but a coat and a prayer. I could have died, but I didn't. And I'm standing here, not because the system saved me, but because I refused to disappear. Some people nodded. Others wiped at their eyes. I went on, telling the story, not just the facts, but the feeling, the betrayal, the silence, the slow climb back to dignity. I spoke of the community center, of the Longer Table, of Mrs. Landry and Pastor Deborah, and all the women who'd sat in my living room and told the truth. "We're not just victims," I said. "We're witnesses. And what we've seen needs to change the laws. Not tomorrow, now." By the time I sat down, the whole room was quiet. The kind of quiet that holds more than applause, it holds respect. After the panel, people lined up to shake my hand. One young woman in a navy pantsuit whispered, "My grandmother died before we could help her. I think of her every time I hear your story." Another woman pressed a card into my palm. "We need your voice at the state legislature. We're drafting a bill to increase penalties for deed fraud." Later, as Annalise and I rode the elevator down to the lobby, she turned to me and said, "You know this isn't the end, right?" I raised an eyebrow. "This is the beginning, May. You've stepped onto a bigger path." I looked at my reflection in the polished metal wall. Same old eyes, same silver curls, but something was different. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. Back home that weekend, the table was full again. Not just women from the group, but a few men now too, sons of victims, caretakers, retired judges, and community organizers. We were growing. We started talking about satellite chapters, about partnering with local churches, about building a small legal aid fund. "Can we really do all that?" someone asked. I smiled. "Honey," I said, "we already are." By early fall, the longer table outgrew my house for good. The meetings were too large now, sometimes 30, 40 people showing up, folding chairs spilling out onto the front lawn, crockpots warming chili in the hallway, Nia running between legs with crayons and sticky fingers. It was a beautiful kind of chaos, but it was time, with a mix of small grants, donations, and one generous check from a woman named Connie, whose husband had quietly sold their farmland while she recovered from hip surgery. We signed the lease on a modest brick building 2 blocks from the church. It had once been a used bookstore. The floors still smelled of old pages and lemon cleaner. The front windows were dusty but wide, the kind that let in morning sun like a warm welcome. We painted the walls soft gold, installed shelves full of resources, pamphlets, guidebooks, legal forms. We turned the old checkout counter into a coffee station with a pot always full and creamer labeled Love. But the thing that made it ours was the wall. It stood at the far end of the room, painted deep slate gray. On it, in white script, we painted the words, "This is where silence ends." And underneath that, we began writing names. Not full names, just first names, middle initials, maybe a year or a city. Names of survivors, names of the women who told their stories, names of those we'd lost, names of those who hadn't yet found their voice but were still part of our circle. May, Charlene, Mrs. Landry, Deb W., Ruthie 1937, Gladys from Detroit, Ava's grandma. Each name was a stone in the foundation. Each name said, "I am still here." That first night in the new building, we held our largest gathering yet. 72 people, standing room only. People drove in from neighboring counties. Some had never spoken aloud about what had happened to them. Others had fought back and won but never been heard. We lit candles, sang hymns, read poetry, and then we handed out chalk markers. "You don't have to tell the story tonight," I said, "but if you've lived the story, write your name." There was a pause. Then one woman stepped forward. She had a cane, a crooked spine, and wore a pink beret that didn't match anything but suited her just the same. "Georgia," she said softly, scrawling her name at the bottom corner. And like dominoes, the others followed. By the end of the night, the wall shimmered with names, and the silence had left the room. Later that week, I got a call from Maya. "Mom, there's going to be an article about you," she said. "The Washington Post. They want to talk about the longer table, about you." I nearly dropped the phone. "Me? I'm not news." "You are, Mama. People are listening now." The next day, I sat down with a journalist named Anna. She wore sensible shoes, asked sharp questions, and let the recorder run without interrupting. I told her everything, from the blizzard to the courtroom, from Jason's forged test result to the attic letter from Harold. "Do you think justice has been served?" she asked. I took my time. "No," I said. "Justice isn't just a verdict. It's when truth no longer needs to scream to be heard." She nodded slowly. "And what would you say to other women going through something similar?" I looked her square in the eye. I'd say, "Don't wait for permission to fight. Don't wait for someone else to see you. Stand up anyway. Stand up shaking. Stand up crying. Just stand." The article ran 2 weeks later. The headline read, "At 79, she was left in the snow. Now she leads a movement." I clipped it, framed it, and hung it next to Harold's letter in my living room. Nia saw it the next time she visited and gasped, "Grandma, you're famous." I laughed. "No, baby, I'm just loud in the right places now." She beamed. "That's even better." And maybe it was. The knock came on a Thursday afternoon, soft but steady. I had just finished tidying up the resource room at the longer table, refilling pamphlets on power of attorney abuse, rearranging the bookshelf, replacing the week-old flowers in the vase by the coffee station. When I opened the front door, there stood Maya. And behind her, Jason. I froze. He looked different. Not just older, but smaller somehow, like he had been deflated and stitched back together. Maya stepped forward quickly. "Mom, I asked him to come. Just to talk. I wouldn't have brought him without telling you, but I wasn't sure you'd say yes." I didn't answer. "Not yet." Jason met my eyes. It's not about forgiveness. I know I used that up, but I've done what I can inside. Programs, letters, speaking, and I want to support what you're building without stepping in the way. I looked between them, my daughter, holding so much hope and pain in her eyes, the man who had tried to erase me, and the quiet hum of the space behind me, the wall of names, the sound of a kettle warming, voices rising in the back room. I stepped aside. "You don't come in as family," I said. "You come in as a guest." He nodded. I led them to the circle room. The day's session hadn't started yet, just a few women gathered, sipping tea, chatting softly. When Jason entered, their voices dipped. I raised a hand. "It's all right," I said. "He's not here to speak. He's here to listen." Jason took a seat in the far back, near the bookcase. He didn't interrupt, didn't comment, just listened. Charlene was the first to speak that day. Her story wasn't new, she'd told it a dozen times, but this time, her voice didn't crack. "I used to think I was the only one," she said. "Now I sit here and see a room full of survivors, and I remember I'm not broken, I'm rebuilt." There were tears, applause, quiet laughter. Jason kept his eyes down. Afterward, he approached the wall of names, and for a moment, just stood there, reading. He didn't ask to add his own. He knew better. Before he left, he turned to me at the door. "Thank you for letting me see what real restoration looks like." I nodded, but didn't smile. "This place isn't for you," I said. "But maybe it's because of you." He took that in, then left. Maya lingered behind. "I know it's complicated," she said, "but I wanted you to see. He's trying." "I see it," I said softly. "But trying doesn't erase truth. Trying is just step one." She took my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the bond between us repair another thread. That evening, I sat at the table, writing next month's outreach plan. We were expanding again, partnering with another center in Baton Rouge and a church in Cleveland. One of our members, Miss Laverne, was planning to start a radio series called Voices of the Invisible. We weren't just recovering anymore. We were building. And in that building, I had found something I thought Jason had stolen for good. My voice, my purpose, my home. It rained the morning of our 1-year anniversary. Not a gloomy rain, but that soft, steady kind that makes the earth smell like beginnings. Inside the longer table, every chair was full. Pastor Deborah stood near the window, leading the room in a quiet hymn, while Miss Evelyn passed around plates of lemon bars dusted with powdered sugar. Nia sat cross-legged on the floor beside the wall of names, drawing new ones in pink chalk. We'd planned something simple, a gathering of thanks, of memory, of momentum. No speeches, no reporters. Just our voices, and what they'd built together. Maya called just before the event. "I wish we could be there," she said. "Nia's got a recital, but we lit a candle for you this morning. She made you a card." "She always makes the best ones," I said, smiling. "She told her teacher your story, you know." I paused, feeling my throat tighten. She said, "My grandma got left in the snow, but she melted it with her fire." Tears welled up behind my glasses. "I didn't know I had that kind of fire in me," I whispered. Maya's voice softened. "We always knew." When the room quieted, I rose from my chair and walked slowly to the front. No microphone this time. Just me and them. "Last year," I began, "I almost died. I was abandoned, erased, and left to freeze. But I didn't, because something in me said, not like this." I looked around the room at the women, the men, the elders, the caretakers. At the time, I thought I was fighting to get my house back, but what I really found was my voice. And in finding that, I found you. I reached into my sweater pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, Harold's letter. I unfolded it carefully, the creases soft with time. "I want to end this year the same way it began," I said, "with truth," and I read it aloud. Every word he'd written in that attic, every reminder of who I was before the storm. The room held its breath, and then, as I finished, someone stood, then another, then the whole room applauding, some weeping, some just standing in quiet, reverent stillness. Nia looked up from the floor and whispered, "Grandma, you're still the queen." I laughed through my tears. "No, baby," I said, kneeling beside her. "We are." That night, after the crowd had gone and the candles had burned low, I sat alone beneath the wall of names. I ran my hand across the chalk-dusted surface. So many lives, so many stories, so much undone by silence and then rebuilt by voice. I added one last name before I left that evening. Not my own, not Harold's. Just one word, Grace. Because in the end, that's what saved me. Not revenge. Not justice alone, but grace given, claimed, lived. And as I locked the doors behind me, I felt it settle in my chest like a blessing. I hadn't just survived. I had testified. And no one, not time, not silence, not even betrayal could take that from me again. This story is a powerful reminder that dignity has no expiration date. No matter our age, our voice still matters. May's journey shows us that betrayal, even from those closest to us, cannot silence the truth when we choose to speak it. Justice isn't always found in courtrooms. Sometimes it's built around kitchen tables, through community, courage, and quiet resilience. In the face of abandonment, May didn't just reclaim her home, she reclaimed herself, and in doing so, lit the path for others to do the same.